Good day. Welcome to Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com. I'm John Marino. We are produced by Sharc Creative, and we are made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built, by Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk, by Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth through a fiduciary standard, and by Jaguar Land Rover of New Rochelle, White Plains, and Mount Kisco. Here on the Cup of Joe political show, we are joined by Dr. Miriam Levitt Flisser. Dr. Flisser is the former mayor of Scarsdale. She is the Republican candidate in the 16th Congressional District here in Westchester, and that is a district that covers most of southern Westchester, part of the North Bronx. It encompasses places like New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and also White Plains, too. Dr. Flisser is running against one-term incumbent running for re-election, Democrat Jamal Bowman. Dr. Flisser is also the medical director of schools in Bronxville, and she has a private practice, a pretty well-known pediatrician around Westchester that is Scarsdale-based. Dr. Flisser, we thank you for joining us here on Westchester Talk Radio. I want you to begin. You have a pretty interesting life story. Tell us about that. You were born in Eastern Europe right at the tail end of World War II.
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me today. It's my pleasure to speak with you. I was born in Europe, and my parents smuggled me out through Eastern Europe, hidden under a mail truck. When we got into the German zone, that was controlled by the United States of America at the time, and so we were placed in a displaced persons camp where we spent several years.
Mm-hmm. Where in Eastern Europe were you born?
Well, I'm not exactly sure because we were really running, and we did go back and try to find evidence with papers and things, but we really couldn't find anything. Because it was a total upheaval after the war, and my parents came from Poland and Belarus, and those were countries whose borders switched constantly too at that moment. So it was hard to define exactly where. But I do have papers issued by the United States as a German. As being born in Germany, which is fine. That's what I accepted, especially since I'm a United States citizen at this time.
How old were you when you came to the U.S.?
I was a little girl, an infant. When I came to America, I was brought to America on a Marine troop ship, U.S. Marine troop ship. And I first saw the Statue of Liberty from the decks of a Marine troop ship.
How old were you?
I was about 3-ish, right? You remember all this is like vague because of the paperwork being inaccessible. But I was, as I said, I first saw the Statue of Liberty. And I have to say that even though I was very small, I do remember it very clearly. And every time I see the Statue of Liberty, I get that feeling again, that feeling of joy and gratitude for being in a place that's so wonderful.
So when you arrived, where did you first go?
To New York. We were in Manhattan for a while, and then we settled in a working class neighborhood in the Bronx. My father worked in a deli you know what he did? It's interesting. He actually made the mustard packets because they were not pre-produced at that time. The deli actually made them and put them in the outgoing orders.
Back in the 1940s and 50s, right?
Yeah.
At that time? Yeah.
Yeah. So he was making them. And I remember because my mother would take me over there to the deli to see him sometimes during the day because he worked very long hours. So I would see him during the day and I would see him making the packets and putting them on the plate. And
so when did you come to Westchester?
Well, I was raised in the Bronx. I didn't come to Westchester until I was a mother and married and a physician. But just let me tell you a little more about the Bronx because it's very interesting. As I said, I was raised in a working class neighborhood. I attended all of my schooling in the Bronx. That's very important. I went to, of course, the elementary schools, and I attended the Bronx High School of Science, which was a big game changer for me since it encouraged studiousness, which I was able to do. So it encouraged studiousness. And I went on then to NYU, which had a Bronx campus at the time, which also worked for me because I was able to commute since my parents could not afford to pay for me to live in a dorm. And I had a scholarship for my tuition. So that's how I went to NYU. And then after that, I went to the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, which is also in the Bronx, and I trained at Montefiore. So all my training is in the Bronx. And I have to say that I've never given up on the Bronx. I'm a lifelong volunteer there. I'm a voluntary faculty on the Department of Pediatrics and for the medical school. And I'm also on the voluntary pediatric staff at the hospital, at Montefiore Hospital.
And that's the medical school at Einstein?
Yes, at Einstein. Yes.
Yeah, in Morris Park, right? Morris Park.
That's right, Morris Park, absolutely.
Precinct? Yeah, I know it well.
Well. So that's
how did you get into politics then?
Oh, I'll tell you how that happened. So anyway, I moved to Scarsdale, and my husband is a school teacher in the Scarsdale. He worked for 20 years in the Bronx, but now he changed over to Scarsdale after 20 years, and we had an issue in Scarsdale, which my neighbors approached me and asked me for help with. And what had happened was they were going to build what they call transportation-related housing, which meant giant apartment buildings over the train tracks in Scarsdale, over the train tracks. I don't know if you know anything about trains, but there's an ecology under the train tracks that you don't want to have too close to your home. There's a whole life under there. And of course, it also throws a shadow onto the houses nearby. And my neighborhood is right by the village of Scarsdale. And so
when was this? In the 90s?
That was yes.
Yeah.
So we went out, it was the late 90s. And we went out there and we walked, we were protesting. We walked with umbrellas to show how far the shadow would fall onto everybody's lawns, et cetera. And so we were able to mobilize the population, to the residents. We were very able to mobilize them, and they came forward, and we had meetings. And anyway, we were able to stop that project. And if you ever go there now, it's still beautiful the way it should be.
Mm-hmm. So we were able to stop how you became mayor of Scarsdale?
Okay, so what happened was, as I said,
into that?
Right. So what happened was, again, my neighbors who appreciated my leadership in the work that we were doing to stabilize and to preserve our neighborhood asked me if I would run for mayor. So I ran for the village board first. That's the usual pathway. Yeah. Yes. So I ran for the village board. I was elected to the village board, and I served on the village board in Scarsdale as well. And then after that, I was appointed as the fire commissioner and the police commissioner as well at a different time in Scarsdale. I trained for that. I want you to know. I do have FEMA training, which is the Federal Emergency Management Association. I am FEMA trained, and I have recently been a FEMA volunteer for COVID in Westchester County. But I'm FEMA trained, and I train every time I take on a position. I train for it. I make sure I know what I'm doing, and so I did that for both the fire and the police department. And we had
that gave you a pretty good background to bring to the office of mayor.
Yes, and so then
fire, financial, police.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then when I went to, I ran for mayor. It was a contested election. And,
what year?
Let me see. I'm trying to work it out. It was like 2011. Yes. And so I was, and then I was the mayor after that. I won, and I was the mayor. So I became the mayor. And of course, that interested me in government services from the inside. I was able to do a lot of good things in Scarsdale. I want to say we had a lot of, I was able to build 2 fire stations, a police station, and also to renovate 2 very important water pumping stations as well, which were quite old and needed the work. But I am a very active kind of person, and we were able to get that all done.
Now, in that position as mayor, you had to work with Greenburgh Town supervisor, my old friend, and somebody I know you know for a long time. Paul Feiner.
Absolutely.
Does this show that you're able to work across the aisle because you were able to work with Paul?
I should hope so. I know Paul from when he was a teenager, and he used to come working for candidates, and he would go from house to house. And so one time we invited him in. We said, listen, talk to us. Tell us what you're doing here. And since then, we had been friends, and we're still friends. But Paul's easy to be friends with.
All right, you're running for Congress now. Why are you running for office? I know you are the Republican candidate. Now, Jamal Bowman obliterated his competition in the Democratic primary. And I can tell you, Democratic politicos and people in the know were shocked locally by how much he won by. He was still expected to beat Catherine Parker and Vedat Gashi, but he steamrolled them. What makes you think you might have a chance?
Because I think that there are some very important issues that the residents of Westchester County have, very important issues. And I think that on those issues, I believe my stand is the correct stand. And one of the most recent ones, as you know, is crime, changes in crime. There's been a large uptick in crime in our southern areas and even our northern areas. And this is not compatible with defunding our police officers. And our current congressman supports defunding the police. I do not. I support recognizing the heroism of our first responders, and not working to defund the police. I understand.
It's more, though, of a local issue that has to be worked through the governor, through Governor Hochul, or maybe Lee Zeldin. I know you appeared a little while ago, earlier today, so we'll talk about that.
Yes, but one moment. No. Yeah. There are federal bills which he voted against. Some of the bills, for example, there was one which provided extra funds for small police departments, and he voted against that. Now, I would never voted against something like that. We've got many small police departments in our borough and in our county, and I would support that. But he voted against it. So that I think crime is an absolutely key issue, and it does affect both federal legislation and, of course, state and even local practices.
Right.
But that's where I stand. I really recognize the police officers as heroes, and I would not jeopardize their positions in any case.
Now, Jamal Bowman voted against the federal infrastructure bill. Would you have voted for it?
Well, I'm not sure I would have voted for it the way it is, right? The way it is. However, I think it's very important that our positions are different in that, as far as the economy goes, the economy and inflation, I don't believe that you can fight inflation by increasing government spending. I do not. I think that's impossible. And since February of 2021, we've increased federal spending by $9 trillion. I didn't say billion. I said $1 trillion.
The figure is 31 trillion now nationally. So
I think that it's definitely an issue for trying to control inflation. It can't be done under those
right. But if we fix our roads and fix our bridges, that has to be paid for. How do we get the money for that?
Well,
how do we cut? And I'm going to guess you would say we need to cut. Where do we cut? Because we seem to be in a time right now where everybody and everything needs to be funded.
Yes, but I think it would be more important to us to improve the economy, not cut, because if the economy is improved, there'll be more money there. And for example, if there are better jobs. So I'll give you an example on that. Why can't we return our high value added jobs for essential products to the United States of America? I don't understand why those.
Could it be because of things like NAFTA, for example, and a couple of deals that came after that, and we have to abide by them?
That's right. But there are many other places in which we have placed to improve the job situation here. Working in high tech, it can be moved back here. And there are other things like infant formula and other things that are absolutely essential for our daily lives. It should never have been exported and make us vulnerable to the so-called, as we say, the so-called supply chain. That supply chain should be right here, and there would be jobs with it. I'm very interested in the status of the United States of America in the world. I think
Dr. Miriam Flisser is the head of medicine in the Bronxville schools, the medical director. She has a private practice in Scarsdale, leading pediatrician in our area. One-time mayor of Scarsdale, and she is running for the 16th Congressional District, spot now held by the incumbent Democrat Jamal Bowman. November 8th, Tuesday, Election Day, we go to the polls. She is the Republican candidate. You touched upon the economy, started to get into that. Baby supply formula. We have only 4 processing plants in this entire country, which I find to be insane. I have no idea, wouldn't even guess as to, maybe I could guess as to how things wound up like that. But again, gas prices, food prices, things like that. How do we go about getting those down to reasonable numbers and reasonable figures, again, knowing that somebody like me, for example, in my mind, whatever gas is, got to pay for it. If you got to go places, well, you got to foot the bill. If you live in New York City or you come from Westchester on the MTA and you come on Metro North, you want to head down from Scarsdale to Manhattan, you got to pay the fare and the fee on Metro North. Yet, how do we make everything be reasonable, including maybe things like congestion pricing in New York City? Because I think once the city institutes that, the city is done.
Yes, I agree with you on that. So let me say that there are 2 different ways. There are 2 different objectives. There is a long-term objective to improve the ecology, to improve the environment, a long-term objective. And of course, I'm in favor of that. When I was the mayor, I instituted some projects which I designed myself in Scarsdale, for which I got an award from New York State for best practices. So I want you to know that I'm very interested in that. But in the crisis situation that we're in now, in a crisis situation, I don't understand how we can stop our pipeline, our Keystone pipelines. I think that we should have independence from countries that are, let us say, our adversaries. I don't want to say enemies, but we have to go and ask them for fuel, and look what happens. That's only going to destroy the economy. It's going to destroy, as you say, the commuter. And in Westchester, there's home heating that has to be considered too. It's going to be winter soon. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the current administration's position to destroy that, and my opponent does discuss this too. He feels that this is good for the future, and he feels the number one issue is global warming. And I am interested in that. But having come from where I come from, I know the difference between a crisis and a long-term. I think that some of the long-term answers for the fuel crisis, such as wind and certain special batteries, et cetera, I think there's a long way to go for them. They are not active enough for us to depend on them at this time. That's a long way. So right now, we should use our resources and give enough fuel to our residents so that they are not in danger, because I fear danger. And remember, I'm a doctor, so I understand how to take care of the emergency situation. I was the head of a large pediatric emergency room, and the long-term situation at the same time. And do I think they're important? I think they're important. But I do think there's a difference in handling that kind of crisis. And that's the judgment that I will bring to it. So that is a different viewpoint of how to handle this. And I think I've explained mine. By the way, I am the medical director, as you mentioned, of the Bronxville School District. And I want you to know that we were totally prepared for the COVID, and we did not have to close our schools. And the reason was that I had certified and learned about Ebola, which was a threat at the time, which did not materialize. Let's hope it will not materialize at this time as well. But I was able to prepare my school district for it. And that includes making the proper spaces for isolation, having the proper gowns and PPE, having schedules and things set up for spacing of students and travel and all these things that have to be worked out with students. We were all in place. We were able to stay open, and we were also able to stay open in the summertime, which is very important in Bronxville, because in the summertime, we have a large amount of students who have special needs in the BOCES program of Westchester County. and they did not have to have their education interrupted. Think about that. Think of the response to that and how the children were hurt by not being able to go to school. That did not take place in Bronxville, where I was in charge.
Let's talk immigration now.
I'll get to that in one second, but I want to tell you that they called me the Ebola lady because I used to walk around and say, no, that won't work. I changed all the cleaning. Everything was already in place. We didn't have to close to do that. And they made fun of me, the Ebola lady, but it all worked out.
In the end, it worked out, and we congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
So let's talk immigration now. And
yes,
that's
absolutely. Okay.
That you would have to deal with if you were elected. Let me say first, New York City Mayor Eric Adams finally came out in his own way, told the Biden administration, we have an emergency here. You don't have a plan. What do we do? It seemed like almost overnight, the Bidens sent to Eric Adams a couple of planes up to Newburgh, to Stewart Airport, and Montgomery Airport, I guess, to Orange County Airport in Montgomery. And that was kind of like, to me, a pushback to him saying, okay, Mayor, we can dump as many people as you like right on you if you don't watch your step. We've had all those flights into the Westchester County Airport that yes. Rob Astorino, the former county executive, kept track of last year and still does to this day. How do we fix this situation? And I do have to say that we need to come up. From my standpoint, I say we have to control who comes across the border and how we do it. But once someone is here, it's tough to send them back. And we do have to help those who come here to this area, to this region, regardless of how they got here. How do we make all these ends meet so we have a successful immigration policy?
Yes. First of all, our immigration policy needs a total reworking, as you very well know. It's a total failure. The fact that we have this open border from Mexico is dangerous for many, many reasons. When I came to this country, I had to prove, and I do have the papers, a distant cousin of my family provided this for me. I had to prove that I would not have to work as child labor. The children that are brought through now do not have any proof of any protections for themselves at all. And the girls are severely abused as they go through, as you know, and this will be lifetime hurt for them. They won't respond. They will require therapy to come out of this terrible situation that they've gone through. And the young men, they're recruited by the cartel into drug trafficking. And of course, the drugs are brought right along through there. You know, fentanyl is a tremendous danger and a cause of death in our country. So there's no question that this so-called system, and it has to be repaired so that it is a proper process. And also it has to go back out of America. I understand from people that have told me that when you have consulates in other countries, you often have to pay bribes to even enter the consulate so you can apply. This is the solution that we need for this problem. That is, this has to be changed. It's one more time. It's the acute, that is the sudden thing that has to be taken care of. It's impossible to manage it now. Now, as far as the folks that are already here, right? I think they can be evaluated to see whether they are law-abiding citizens, whether they are interested in education, and then there can be a process for absorbing them and making them citizens as well. Of course, we wouldn't want to send someone back to be killed somewhere. But on the other hand, I would be careful about this. Remember how carefully I was vetted and what I had to produce. And I'm saying that not to brag about it, but to show you how I was protected. And I want to see the children who come through now protected in the same way. I think that's an important issue, which really has been ignored, how it hurts them to come through. And I think this is something that has to be, it requires very careful federal legislation. I think it should be finished. The wall should be finished so that we can control it. And I believe in funding the proper personnel to watch the borders there. And I think that would make an enormous difference. And remember, that would reduce crime, which definitely is brought to a higher level by this as well. And that's one of our biggest topics.
The war in Ukraine. Your thoughts on that? Do we need to help the Ukrainians more? Should we still put up a no-fly zone? Do we need to back off and maybe just sit down and encourage Putin and Zelensky to work a deal now?
Okay, let me point out that I think that this and the Afghanistan issue were created by the fact that America was not perceived as the dominant power that we were in the world before that time. I think that we were perceived as weaker and not able to respond, and not interested in maintaining our position as the world leader. And that's why these things happened. That's why our adversaries felt free to invade Ukraine. I think that if we had been strong, they would not have done that. And that's diplomacy. That's not, I'm not talking about military. I'm talking about diplomacy. So I think that that's an absolutely key issue. The domination of America, the dominance of America in the world is something that creates a wonderful situation for everyone. It adds positive things. I would know. My life started that way. It adds positive things. And I think that one of the most important things that we can do is bring forth the greatest positive effect that has ever taken place in the world. That is the power of the American people.
You met earlier today, and we are recording this on a Wednesday right here in the middle of October here, I guess. What is today's date? Wednesday, October 12th is our date today. So earlier today, you were with Lee Zeldin. You were in White Plains, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. Lee Zeldin, of course, the Republican candidate for governor.
Yes.
What came about when you met with Lee Zeldin and campaigned with him? What was that like?
Well, Lee Zeldin has some very, very important ideas for New York State. The topic that we were speaking about today in White Plains was the plan to grant parole to a prisoner who had killed a police officer. The police officer was from Larchmont, and what had happened was the police officer had tried to save this man's life. The man was on the tracks, and he tried to remove him from the tracks. And the man was able to, as he was being helped, he was able to manipulate the police officer, take his gun, and shoot the police officer, and the police officer died of his wounds. Now, the idea of paroling someone, this type of criminal, is anathema to me. I would not be able to stand it. And I have to say that in the meeting today, the family of that police officer was there. His wife and a child was there as well. These are people who have lived without their beloved family member for the rest of their lives. I don't see why the criminal should be released. I think that he received life in prison, and that's what he should have to submit to. Now, I do point out that there's a parole board involved, right? And Mr. Zeldin did explain that there can be changes in the regulations for the voting of the parole board. Right now, it takes a majority of the parole board to grant parole, and he feels that it could require a unanimous decision. And I agree with that. I think that's a very good idea and a good process for making sure that we always recognize the heroism of our first responders, and we don't respond to those of them who kill them or in any way harm our heroic police officers.
Dr. Miriam Flisser, We thank you for joining us here on Westchester Talk Radio. She is the Republican candidate for the 16th Congressional District, covering southern Westchester and part of the North Bronx, too, and encompassing Yonkers, New Rochelle, White Plains, and Mount Vernon, against the incumbent Democrat, Jamal Bowman. Dr. Flisser, best of luck to you on Election Day. Again, thank you for being part of Westchester Talk Radio. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Miriam Flisser here on WestchesterTalkRadio.com. I'm John Marino, and this is the Cup of Joe political show. We are produced by Sharc Creative, made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built by Michael Labriola, land escape design, and construction of Armonk. Also by, we are also made possible by Jaguar Land Rover of Shell, White Plains, and Mount Kisco, and by Hightower, Westchester, managing your wealth through a fiduciary standard. Now, catch all of our Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, Dutchess, Orange, and Fairfield County Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Sharc Creative YouTube. Download our app. It's called Westchester Talk. Take us with you 24/7, 365. And yes, we are now on Apple Podcasts, too.